All right. Well, welcome back here in beautiful, sunny Seattle. Our summer season is back. Our air quality index is now receded from 180 back to our standard 20. And so my lungs are actually, I think, clear now, thank goodness. And clear enough to do another interview here on the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. I'm so excited to visit this gentleman because he's in one of my favorite cities of San Diego. We met through National Speakers Association. He's a public speaking coach, which I'm going to love to hear some feedback, right? I'm going to talk maybe some AI and non-AI stuff. He's also a team builder, which I also have been for 26 years, so I'm sure we're going to say some stuff. And he's a member of National Speakers Association SoCal's chapter. And here's the fun fact that you don't know is that he is a photo editor. I even saw on his website, like he can remove a family member and move yourself in closer to that. Let's meet this gentleman, the one and only Milo Shapiro. Hey, Milo, what's going on? Oh,
I gotta say, your theme song is fantastic. It takes me back to being like a kid tuning into sitcoms on a Friday night or something. It was so 70s, 80s fun. It woke me up. So good on you.
well, you'll love it. So that song was actually custom written from the participants of my engaging conference. So the engaging
Wow.
conference is coming up in October 23rd through 25th, and our good friends at Song Division will take responses from the audience and the chat, right? And they will write your conference or your company a song.
That is a terrific service. And this is not set up to plug them because I was just enjoying it. That's great.
Yeah. So that's what we've been up to on that side. So, yeah. So Milo, thank you so much for joining us. You've been around here. You've been public speaking coaching for a long time. So, for my friends who haven't met you, Milo, and it's so funny. I was listening to a whole bunch of love songs, and I almost called you Miley, and I'm like, that would have been a huge mistake, right? Miley Shapiro. What like coming to the stage?
We're a little different.
You're,
I'm sure we have some things in common, but I can't tell you what any of them are at the moment.
Well, let's find out this, right? For my friends who don't know you, describe who you are and what you do, Milo.
Sure. I'm Milo Shapiro, and primarily I'm a public speaking coach, helping anyone who wants to be more, as the book says, prepared, polished, and powerful when they have reason to speak. So whether it's a one-time speech that suddenly comes up and catches them off guard, or it's a presentation they give on a regular basis and they're not connecting as well as they want to, or if it's, every week I give a presentation to my staff and I can tell nobody likes how I do it. Whatever their need is to improve as a speaker, that's what I mostly help them with. That's on top of my work as a speaker at conferences and doing my team building work as well. Those are the three main parts of my business improv ventures.
Outstanding. Well, I love all of those. I'm really a big fan of improv. As a team builder, really did a lot of improv. Although one time I got called once to be the opening act for a comedian. And I don't necessarily do stand-up comedy, but it is kind of like on the dream list. So I actually did it, and it turned out the number one thing that I did was, yeah, I think three-headed robot, right?
Yes, sure.
So what you do is you build a three-headed robot by taking three people, and they can only answer the question one word at a time. Instead, and because it was like a nightclub setting, I was able to build a three-headed Tinder date.
That's great.
And
Was it
how do I?
sets of people? Like
Three different women. Yeah, three different women. So I was the guy asking questions, and the three
Oh,
women were answering as if they were a Tinder date. And I got to tell you, the only reason anything works here in this new age is every single person had their cell phone up recording.
that's a good sign.
That was a good sign. Wait, I do have to do one other piece here too. This is brand new. I finally put this on my show. By the way, if you want all the rest of these in the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast, go to engagingvirtualmeetings.online. We have episodes dropping every Wednesday, including Milo will drop back again in the future. And if you're watching live here by getting this all way here, do us a favor, hit the subscribe, share, like or commenty thing. And now the best part here, Milo, I just really want to know. How'd you get here? Right? Like, so you did all these things, right? And the best part I love is that everyone's got their unique path about how they do what they do. So how did you get here, Milo?
It's a very convoluted story, but I love sharing it.
I got time. We got time.
Completely different life up until age 35. My college degree is in computer science, IT. I was writing in languages nobody uses anymore, COBOL and CICS. And during that time, at least you recognize them. So that's a good
I
sign.
know Cobalt for sure.
So during those years, though, I was also doing improv and fell in love with just the fun and the community and the entertainment and making people laugh. And it was just so much fun. I was even going out of town to across Canada and the West Coast studying with some of the masters. And I decided to get the guts up to quit my IT job and start this company, Improv Ventures, to do team building events using improv games, because improv teaches us about listening skills, building on each other's ideas, creative problem solving, and it all happens within the games. And I can critique people on the games without hurting their feelings about critiquing their work performance, even though it's the same lessons. So that took off for a little while in 2000. And then somewhere late 2000, early 2001, some of the people in the classes kept saying to me, you should do this with bigger crowds, not just 15 to 20 with the individual feedback, but like 300, like a motivational speaker. So I got involved with the National Speakers Association and learned that a lot of event planners want interactive speakers who can do things like that, but you can't just play games. So I developed a keynote speech called "We Gotta Fail to Succeed." It's about letting go of being perfect, not being worried about, making mistakes here and there, learning from them, moving forward, because we get stuck if we don't. And in improv, we can't be perfect. You have to let go of it to do improv at all. And so for about half the keynote, I get the audience playing, and half is me sharing stories and ideas. And that took off. I became like 70% speaker, 30% team builder. I was okay with that because the speaking was fun. The unexpected twist came when people started hanging around after my speeches and saying, I was wondering, would you work with me on my speaking skills? Would you come in and work with my staff? And for a while, I just kept saying no. I had years in Toastmasters, and by then I'd had a few years in National Speakers Association. I had my theater background, but still I wasn't trained to train others. And finally, one man was really insistent that he thought I was the one who was supposed to help him. His business was in trouble. He needed help fast. He was selling on QVC, and they were going to cut him if he didn't get better. So he came over with VHS tapes. That's how old this story is. And we watched him. And I said, yeah, I can see some things we're very specifically going to work on. You're not selling because to be honest, you're off-putting to your audiences. We worked on a few things with him. I only had a couple of weeks, went back to Pennsylvania to do his QVC thing, 7-minute time slot, like always. And he sold out his entire product line in 5 of the minutes. And they didn't know what to do with 2 minutes of dead air. They sold a product he didn't actually have with him at the time. He had to ship it quickly. And they said, oh my gosh, you were completely different on camera. That's why the audience loved you. What'd you do? He said, I hired a speaking coach. And I said, wow, maybe I should be doing this more. Added it to my website. SEO was easier back then to get ranked higher if you knew what you were doing. It's a lot harder now. And I'm now probably 70% speaking coach, 20% speaker, 5% team builder, and 5% interviewer. I interview people about their businesses to create video for them. That's a little side jaunt of the coaching, where they get to be on their own little Oprah episode about themselves, except I'm Oprah because they can't afford her. She ain't calling,
like
but I'm
Oprah.
happy to work.
You got the president, you got Miley, you got Oprah, you got it all, Milo. Well, I got my QVC story. That's such a great QVC story because QVC is like one of the greatest labs for instant feedback. Like if you have
Yes.
never seen the behind the scenes of a QVC, right?
No,
What happens, right, is that they have a whole board and they can actually see the sales chart going to like everything you do. So here's one of the things, like I heard a keynote from a QVC trainer and they said, here are the things like they discovered by accident. Like they had a cereal and there was a bowl that was too small. So when they poured the cereal spilled over onto the table. And that was a mistake, they thought. But the sales skyrocketed because what it symbolizes was abundance, that there was more than the bowl could hold. So then they like QVC has a whole catalog of tricks like this. Like the other one is jewelry. If you have jewelry, play with the jewelry, right?
yes.
Because what it does is that, right? Well, yeah, at first it's introducing that. And the second one, when the lights hits it and changes the light on the jewelry, that's what people buy.
Well, this wasn't quite so advanced in 2004. They may have had charts like that, but not like they do now. But he said 5 minutes in, he suddenly saw a look on her face and he knew something was up. And she said, he sold plants. And she said, I understand you also have a plant food. And he thought, I don't want to try and sell my plant food. I don't have that with me. But I had taught him, don't argue with the host. That's one of the things I saw you doing. So go along with it as best. And afterwards he said, why did you start selling the plant food? And she said, because you sold out all the plants. So it was like, oh, then that was a good reason to talk about something else. Okay.
Yeah, the yes and, right? The yes and. So,
Right.
right, the yes and is such a key part. Well, I want to ask about your theater background, but not yet. The first thing I really want to ask is probably what is like now that you have this history of coaching people, what's like the number one tip that you see over and over? So, like here, for instance, in team building, I'll give you mine, right? In team building, right, it's communication, right? It's like we can all universally people say, for team building, that great teams communicate. But here's what we discovered, and we discovered it through videotape, just kind of like QVC, right? Like watching VHS, is that we put GoPros on all the teams. And one of the things what we found out is that the highest scoring teams, they never shut up, Milo. They just never shut up. Like
Interesting.
90 to 100% of the time, they are talking. And if they're not even talking about the game, they're talking to each other, building relationship. But the losing team, shut up. Right? They don't talk. They stopped talking. They gave up on each other. Like Milo, they're like, I just give you the hand, right? And tell you to talk to it. And they stop talking for 10, 20, 30, sometimes 40 minutes of a 60-minute segment. So anyways, so that's
Back in just building on that, back in my volleyball days, you can't tell from this screen, but I'm 5'5", so I was not a spiker. So I was a really good setter. I could be down on the floor getting anything anywhere in seconds. And my thing was, I will yell, I got it, or help every single play. Do not go for that second ball because we're going to crash into each other. Listen to the communication. And they were shocked sometimes. I would be the second ball, I'd be behind the back line, bumping that thing up to the front line, and then on my feet against the front. But if someone's just, it's all about the communication. And the other team, you'd hear the occasional I got it, but I was on it for every single play. So anyway, completely unrelated. So the biggest
back to speaker coach. What's like your number one tip? Like that now that you got a history with it, like if we could immediately help a speaker who's listening to this program, what's that number one tip that you
I'm
have?
going to tell you first what it's not, because this is where people go, and then I'll tell you what it is.
Cool.
People
That's great.
always want to start with the uhs and the ums.
Yeah.
And I had one client who kept complaining about her. She said, oh, I do this, I do that. I said, let me tell you a story. And I don't know what story I told her. I probably made something up on the spot. But I purposely put in 3 ums and 3 uhs as I told the story. And at the end, I said to her, so now, having heard that story, how many times did I and in there? She goes, well, you didn't do it at all. You're obviously very professional. I said, I did at least 3 of each because they were on purpose. I may have done more. And she said, you did? I said, yes. Why do you think you didn't notice them? And she said, because you were really interesting. I said, right. So don't start with worrying about uhs and ums. I don't like that Toastmasters is already hitting the clicker from the first time you're up there to teach you that. All you're doing is making people self-conscious. Interesting speakers, you don't notice that nearly as much. It's when you get bored, you start going, man, this guy says and a lot. So that's what it's not.
That's
What
great.
it is for most of my clients is getting that balance of stories and data, because we feel like we've only got 10 minutes. We have to make good use of the time. So it's data, 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 data. We become a big data dumper. And I've got to slow people down from doing that, because people can only absorb so much. But if you take time to explain a little data and then put it in the context of a story, or vice versa, share a story where the data is the moral of that story, people are going to remember your program way better. And you can only share so much information. So follow up with an email with more data, or come back and give another presentation with more data. But don't try and overwhelm people to make yourself worthwhile. They will enjoy you more and they will remember more of what you say. Next step, of course, is learning how to tell a good story. That takes some coaching.
Wow. Well, geez, I'm gonna park the story piece here. That's so good because I want to come back to. Well, let's go talk about your theater background. What's your theater background?
I was in Toastmasters, and there was an offshoot of Toastmasters called Laugh Masters. And Laugh Masters every month would have a guest speaker, either a humorist or on the topic of humor. And one time they brought in an improv troupe. This is 1990. And I had done a couple of plays and stuff. I'd done high school acting, but not much. But I had never seen improv before. This is way before Whose Line Is It Anyway, or at least here in the States. And I was just mesmerized, like, I am supposed to be doing that. That is so me. This is like charades on crack. And so I approached one of them sheepishly afterwards, that how does one learn to do that? And they're like, oh, we're not even really a troupe. We're an improv class. We were excited someone let us do a show for you guys. Call our teacher. So I called Jackie and I jumped into her classes, and that started a life with improv where it was first classes with her, and then I got into a troupe called the Grunions, and the Grunions led me to San Diego to theater sports. We established the San Diego chapter. They're international, and I was with San Diego Theater Sports for 14 years, from 93 to 07. And that you said about QVC as a training ground. Improv is the best training ground for what do people find entertaining. Because if you're doing something and they're not reacting, change gear. And you do this 10 scenes a week for 14 years, you really pick up quickly what do audiences react to? What are they likely to find entertaining? What works? And the fact that you're not on your own. I tried stand-up, and as the video on publicdynamics.com shows you, did not work well. I could do it, but I underestimated how different it is. You're on your own. With improv, it's, if I was doing it with you, it's how can I play off what John says, and count on that John will play on what I said and not build on his own last idea. That's what comes up in the team building is, are you really building on each other's, or are you going back to your idea over and over again? So that camaraderie was just so joyful. Or you shared in the misery together, but at least you weren't on your own.
Yeah, I love that that improv does, again, like it goes back to that, like QVC, instant feedback.
Yeah.
And then you start to notice patterns of like what works and what doesn't work. And my number one part, and I tell every trainer or facilitator, go take improv training if you want to be better. Right?
Yeah.
Go take it any class. And I got to take a class. Nancy Guppy, who is like here in Seattle, was infamous because they created Almost Live. I don't know if you've heard of this show called Almost Live. It was the Saturday Night Live ripoff that was Northwest specific, and it is funny. Like one of the gentlemen who's our NSA member who was on the stage this last Saturday, Bill Staten, has won 29 Emmys, many of them because he was on that show.
And I love Bill. I don't know if you know, I've known him for many years. Great guy.
Go online and go watch all his Almost Live episodes, because you'll see people like Bill Nye the Science Guy in the early stage.
Oh, how cool.
And so like, and that's where they honed, all of those, right? They're kind of like bits, right? We all get them. But the one thing that improv really told me was that the harder you try, the worse it gets. It's the one thing about improv. Right?
You try too hard. You have to just go with the flow. And trying to be funny is going to work against you.
Yes.
Do what the scene needs. For instance, there was a woman named Jean in our troupe. We used to play in teams. That's how theater sports works.
Yeah.
And Jean probably didn't get the biggest laughs of the night, but you always wanted Jean on your team because what she was great at was figuring out what the scene needed. So let's say Trent and I were out there and we just like the scene wasn't really coming together. Jean would know how to come and go, "Excuse me, sir, telegram," and leave. Nothing funny about that, but she knew that us suddenly getting news was going to get me and Trenton going again. It's those little things that make the difference. And I totally agree with you about business and improv. I don't think for all of the sales and marketing and business courses I've taken, anything has had a stronger influence on my success in business and in the work that I do than my improv. And as a speaking coach, sometimes a client will be struggling with something. I go, just to take this in a different direction. What if we said it like this? And I'll say it completely different. I'll move and they're like, "How did you just do that off the top of your head?" I'm like, well, after making up a musical on the spot, that wasn't hard by comparison. And that's what I'm doing for improv right now. I'm in an improv musical troupe. We're 75-minute musical on the spot. Hardest improv I've ever done, but so satisfying when it works.
What's great about your friend too, she's go back to the volleyball metaphor, she's the setter.
Yeah. She's the setter.
The telegram is a set, right? And then you just walk away, and your team, two of your teammates are coming up here, right? Trying to figure out which one of you is can knock this thing down, and that's where the light bulb comes on. She's a setter. She's great.
And she is funny. By the way, she does get her share of laughs. It's just that skill that I appreciated her for.
Well, and it's a skill, and a team skill, like in the business setting, you really need setters.
Yes.
Right? This is kind of like actually getting to me on my MC part. Like an MC is like a full-time setter for a conference, right? Because they're always trying to, right? They're always setting up the next person to do their thing, and they don't have a lot of time, right, to do it. They're not the star necessarily, right? But if you get a great MC, they are continually setting virtually anything.
Not only setting up what the person's going to do, but setting them up to look good. I think that's a big part of it. That's actually why I started doing those interview videos, because most people know their stuff, but you go on a podcast and it's about the audience.
Yeah.
So what I do in my interview show, which is not has no audience, there's no real interview. I don't care who sees it. We set up in advance what questions they're going to do. I coach them how to do it so that they're going to look good, because that's the goal, is for them to look good. And as the host or MC of that event, it's all about making them look good, not me.
The MC is also a digger, right? So the also what I mean by that is like they have to take like failures or really difficult situations and find a way. Let's see, Milo, have you heard about my Jets one? Have you heard about Jets?
No, no.
Okay, so I'm the MC and they asked me to interview the vice president of sales, right? And it's like 425 stores watching on webinar. So we can't even see them. So like we're not getting the feedback. But we come around there and so I ask him a bunch of questions. We're getting close to the end of the interview and we come around and I said, "Okay, hey VP, Matt, do you have any final words for us?" And he goes, "Well, John, I'm like, "Matt, what the heck is that?" And he goes, "Oh, John, we're our headquarters is underneath the military flight path, right? So that's a military jet flying over us right now." And I'm like, "So what's really cool is the company, because I sat around and researched the company, their nonprofit resources goes to the military. So they're actually really close and tight to the military." And I said, "Oh, I see it, Matt. I see what you do." Well, first I said the first thing that came to me in improv was everybody chat jets.
Everybody chat jets?
Yeah, because they're all on virtual. So everyone started chatting jets. The chat starts blowing
Oh,
up.
chat jets. Okay.
Right? So there's jets, there's like jet icons, there's like people putting text versions of jets. Like there's all this creativity on there because they are laughing because it's so funny, right? And then the second part, he tells us about the military flight, and I come back and I go, "Oh, I see how it is. You end your keynote with a military flyover. Thank you so much, VP Matt. Let's go on to our next thing."
Couldn't plan that, or you couldn't afford to plan that.
And it's the most memorable moment,
Yep.
right? It
Yeah.
is the most memorable moment.
Yeah,
I don't know.
how many years was Carol Burnett on the air? But when you ask people the favorite things, it's usually the bloopers that they kept in. They made the most of them.
So, what are some of your favorite things in your history of either public speaking or public coaching? Do you got a favorite moment somewhere in there?
This is not quite a moment, but a favorite client story.
Yeah.
I have a client, and she lets me use her real name, so this is legit. Her name is Ellen, and Ellen is in the Coast Guard, and she came to me because of the fact that she hated the weekly staff meeting where everyone had to speak for 5 minutes about what was going on so everybody else would know. She said, "I always prayed I would be first or second, not because I'd be any better." She said, "I would still babble endlessly and I could tell people didn't enjoy me, but at least if I was at the end, I would sweat through my uniform with fear. I wanted to get it over with." So we worked a bunch of times. She started getting better, more confident, because the bottom line is most people just don't know how. And once they learn it, it's not that hard. It's not about talent. It's just that some people intuit the things the rest of us need to learn. So she got better to the point that one day her commanding officer said to her, "By the way, the admiral is coming and he needs to be briefed about the Tijuana border situation, and you're going to do it." And she said, "No, no, no, no. I'm the one who's so scared to speak that I'm seeing and coach." He goes, "I don't care if you're scared or not, and you're now the best one here." So we did a couple of appointments to get ready for the admiral. She briefs him, and afterwards she's like, "Thank goodness that's over with." And he doesn't say anything to her. And on the way out the door, he stops and looks back and says, "By the way, she's very good. That made it much clearer. She should be the one to brief the congressman." And he closes the door and she goes, "No." And her boss says, "You don't get to say no to the admiral." So the congressman comes a few weeks later after a couple more appointments to get ready for the congressman. And she briefs the congressman, praying he'll say nothing on the way out the door. He never addresses her one way or the other. Maybe he said thank you. He doesn't say anything. He sends an email afterwards that says, "That was so much clearer. I now finally understand it. She was very good. She should be the one to brief the White House." So she went from her coworkers to the White House in 3 steps, and then another congressman. And then after that second congressman, she was telling me how it all went. She sounded excited. And I said, "Ellen, you haven't said anything about being nervous." She said, "Oh, you know what? I think I was so eager to try out the new stuff we came out with on him that I forgot to be nervous." I said, "Did you even hear what you just said? You forgot to be nervous?" And she said, "Oh, yeah, I guess I've come a long way, huh?" I said, "I think you have." And now she's the go-to person for retirement parties and press stuff. She's having fun with it because she just learned. She didn't know what she didn't know. And she already had a great personality. She just needed how to make use of it well in those kind of settings. So that's one of my favorite client stories.
Public speakers, listen to this. If you are not having fun on stage, right, don't do it or change something.
Yeah.
because it is so true. Like, because all she was focusing on was on the nervousness. And now when you focus on, I mean, public speaking can be really, really fun, right?
It should
Because,
be for your audience too. If you're enjoying yourself,
yeah.
they're going to have a better time too.
Well, the second part too, Milo, I'll give this piece of advice that I came on another podcast like three ago, and it said like this: nobody in the audience wants a crappy speaker.
Yeah, they're not
Nobody,
looking forward to heckling you. It's not like that.
right? Like, do you sit in the audience going, "God, I really wish Milo is gonna suck it up today. I want him to blow this whole keynote." Right? No, everybody's cheering for you.
Right. They're rooting for you. They want
Right.
you to do well. They want to have a good time. They want to come out of it feeling entertained, informed, able to tell other people why they liked it. Everyone's hoping for the best. And if you can convey your message to the best of your ability, they're likely to do that. And humor is a big part of that. A lot of times people say to me, well, this is a serious topic. I had one guy, he was giving a presentation on Lou Gehrig's disease.
Yeah.
And he called me up and he said, I'm being flown to Australia to give this presentation. I've been all over your website. I like what I see about you as a coach, but I also see all this improv stuff. Just to be clear, there's no room for humor in this presentation. And I said, got it, which he took to mean I agree. Got it was we're not going to have this conversation on the first visit. So over the next 4 or 5 visits, we rearranged the material, which was all disorganized. And then we redid his PowerPoint that was going to completely undermine anything he was saying. We worked on his vocal variety because he was really bland. We toned down his vocabulary because it sounded condescending, all these different things. And he'd admit to all of this now. I'm not going to say his name, but he would. And about 6 visits in, he said, this keeps getting better. I've been trying it out on coworkers and my wife. I can't wait to see what today's topic is. I said, oh, good, because it's humor. And he said, you got to be kidding me, because he was so clear. And I said, John, you trusted me this far. Not you, John, different John. John, you've trusted me this far. So let's start with this premise. We are never, ever, ever going to say anything that minimizes the suffering of someone with Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. And he said, okay. I said, good. So now that that's our premise, let's build on that. Are there some stereotypes about us researchers that we can poke fun at? He's like, oh, yeah, we're kind of an odd bunch. I said, there's material. How about things we thought about ALS 60 years ago, and now we know so much more that it's almost laughable where we were 60 years ago. And he's like, oh, you know what? We used to believe, oh, I get it. We can include some humor about who we are and what we try and do. I said, as long as it's never at the expense of people who are suffering, right? We found him 4 laughs in an hour. Not exactly a stand-up comedy routine. But he wrote me from Australia the next day. Holy cow, people slapping me on the back. Most entertaining speech we've ever had here. You have to be back next year. He said, I can't believe 4 laughs made that big of a difference. And I wrote to him and said, how many laughs in the rest of the conference? And he wrote back, not one. So we processed it after. I said, when you did it the first time, they thought it was an anomaly. But when you did it the second time, they were like, oh, this guy's kind of funny. And you paid off twice more in the second half. But more importantly, what was going on between the laughs? And he stopped and he went, oh, they were paying attention better to see if I do it again. I said, yeah. He said, thank you for pushing on me on that, because I never would have thought 4 laughs would make that big of a difference in an hour. But it did for him. And there are a couple of exceptions. There are times when you shouldn't use humor. One was an audience of people who had lost people to children. I mean, there are times when you can't be light in a situation.
Read your audience. Yeah.
Right. But this just wasn't one of them. And then he just needed to see that.
The biggest step is from 0 to 1.
Yeah.
Right. Like for him too. And I got to give this. So I'm working on a friend's keynote, and we really got to this key point that he's so strongly passionate believes in. You need to get outside of your natural network. Right? You got to get out of your natural, like your default stuff. And as a coach, I think that's the thing that you help people all the time, is that they somehow or another develop this pattern, whatever it is. And then in that humor part, he probably is right for making that decision, because somebody maybe made fun of somebody who had Lou Gehrig's, right? And saw that and says, I will never do that, whether he did it or somebody else did it, and missed the point, saying it's context sensitive. It's not always. It's not a global, right? And so anyway, I love that too. The audio variability too has also been picked up. One of my friends who does AI on virtual presence said that's the #1 skill in 2023. If people would just vary their voice, some things like the pace, some going really fast, to sometimes just making their point slower or lower, or higher, right? Just
Everybody
let
thinks. Sorry.
power.
Everybody thinks vocal variety means pitch. And I have a program that I teach when I'm coaching people called the 7 variants of vocal variety. And
Oh, so cool.
one of them, and you just brought up another one, is speed. But by giving them 7 different tools they can use, and there's really 8. It just took me a while as a coach to figure that out, but I'd already branded the 7 variants. Now there's a 3A and a 3B,
Bonus.
8 for the price of 7. But it's one of those things where in life where if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I want people to have the saw, and I want people to have the screwdriver, so that they can fit it to the situation and use their voice and their face and their body to the best of their ability.
Okay, here a gift just came to me. Call the last one Powerball. Like in the lotto, right? There's like 7 numbers.
Extra one. It took me a second.
Then they draw the Powerball, and that's the one that gets you $1 billion jackpot.
Yep. I actually was resistant to I'm like, maybe I shouldn't teach this to people. I'll throw off my marketing. I'm like, no, just call it 3A and 3B. It was a variation on speed.
So you've seen the explosion of virtual meetings, right? What has to happen, right, for Milo to be engaged in a virtual meeting? Either as an especially as an attendee.
Leading up to that, the worst time in my business since 2004 was 2020, when everybody just stopped going to meetings at all. Then they got on virtual, and there was this feeling of, it's only Zoom. I can just kind of, how good do you have to be? It's only Zoom. And it took until about October for people to finally hear what I was saying, and the calls coming in going, I think I need to be good on this Zoom thing too, because it may not be going away. And I was like, yes, you have to be 5 times better on Zoom than you do in person, because you have a captive audience and you've got the energy of being in person and all those things. So if you don't bring that to Zoom magnified, people are going to start checking their emails, turning off their cameras, which is horrific, talking to all those, just the name on the screen feeling, horrible feeling. Yep. So you definitely want that. So in terms of being engaging, it's using all of the things that seem obvious, but having to remember, you have to keep your energy up. I know you feel strongly about people standing. I don't do it just because of the fact that I use my keyboard too much and I'd be running back and forth. And you're so tech, you probably have a solution for that too. But I'm okay. I think I'm pretty energetic seated, but a lot of people, that's the death of them. So doing what you have to keep your energy up to be here. Using your voice well, trying to bring in little games and tricks and interactive, and put this in the chat. And one of the things that I say, I think we talked about this when we first met, is I am not a webinar person. I'm giving a keynote presentation this afternoon virtually, and I said to them, please, if you possibly can we make it a meeting, not a webinar? And they said, why? I said, because I'm going to either say, or ask you to say, better ask them to say, if you're in a quiet place, unmute yourself. If you know the dog's going to bark, the baby's going to cry, or there's going to be a jet plane going over, then mute yourself. But if you can, please leave it on, because just that little laugh in the right place, or me opening a sentence, like one of the things I'm going to say in this is, finish this sentence slow and steady. And if nobody can talk back because it's a webinar, I go nowhere with that. I have to finish my own sentence. I want the audience to yell back things. We can do that in a meeting. So these are different ways. Engagement's got to be more than how many of you and having people raise their hand. That's an okay thing if it fits the moment, but we need more than that. So to figure out, how can I be playful with this so that it's an experience we're all sharing, not just a recording that I could have listened to later.
You are the second person who's talked about this. My good friend Aaron Schmookler, who's leads many business meetings here in the Northwest, created something which I've deemed open mic. And open mic, he says, if you have that set up, everyone unmute your mic. And because he's looking for that gasp, he's looking for that laugh. He's like, and that mute gets in the way of that. And he also says it's also a barrier to collaboration, because it's one more thing. Like, you have to consciously, right, look to unmute the button before you talk. And if you can get a quiet place, he's actually seen higher collaboration with this thing where you try and get your entire, small group to open mic.
Yeah, so, I mean, you can always mute everybody if there's the person who forgets they're on. And it's known to happen. Sure. Hopefully the box lights up yellow so you can say, Debbie, we can hear you, that kind of thing.
I'm a producer. Like, I'll take care of it for you. Like, I've saved a lot of people from embarrassing moments by hitting the mute button right before anybody else can.
But you do want to one thing you do want to do is you want to set up your meeting so people come in muted. because you can always invite them to not do it, but people don't expect it. I was in a meeting the other day where someone came in late, zoomed in, and was turning to the person next to them talking. They didn't realize they were coming into the meeting unmuted.
Yeah. 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 I have a very good friend, and she has like 250, 300 attendees unmuted. What a disaster.
Yeah.
Everything going on. Right. Okay. So speaking of non-disasters, let's talk about the future.
Okay.
Milo, what do you see for the future for virtual, hybrid, whatever, speaking? What do you see in the future?
I see it kind of in some ways the same. I think we've already ridden the wave of meetings have to be in person, and we've learned no, they don't. Oh, everything can be virtual. No, there's a sense of wanting that connection and being there. And I think we've probably hit that point where it's the right level of do some things virtual and then do have your annual one together, but the ones in between on Zoom. What I would like to see more of, and I'm starting to see this, is the speaker doesn't need to be here, but we do. So there was one I applied to where they're like, you can do it from home, but everyone is going to be in the room here.
Yeah.
So
The version of hybrid. Yeah.
right. And I think that's nice because then you get the networking, you get the energy in the room. I can hear everybody together, but it's not 50 different people and their unmade bed behind them. They're having their convention. But especially if you're info sharing, there just isn't that much more to be gained by the person being on the stage in front of you. If it's very interactive, yes, it's nice to have the person there, but if you can have way better speakers because you can pay them half as much because they don't have to fly in and get the hotel and the rest of that. I know a futurist who said, at first I was really resistant to this. He said, now I'm giving 3 keynotes a day.
Yes.
If I charge them each half, I'm still making more money and I never had to get out of my own apartment. Oh, he probably has a big house, not apartment, but he never had to leave his room.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said for it. Pros and cons, but I do miss the interacting. I mean, it's nice, but I'm giving this presentation together with people all over the world, and how cool is that? That someone set their alarm for 2:30 in the morning in the Philippines to be with me. If they're willing, great, but they probably wouldn't have flown in.
Yeah, and that's what I see. And that's where I think hybrid, is really gaining this year right now because you can have the energy of the in-person combined with the reach of virtual if you just do it right.
Yeah.
If you just do it right. But there's so many places kind of not doing it well because it's just as hard. Hybrid right now is kind of like where Zoom was 3 years ago, where people are like, oh, we could make everything hybrid. And there are a lot of people who are kind of giving up on it because it's too complicated or too expensive. And I think they're missing out because
I'm surprised you would say it was more expensive because I would think it shouldn't be. And I mean, putting someone on Zoom on a big screen just doesn't seem like it should be that complicated.
Well, if you go to a hotel and ask the AV department to do it, it does now start to cost a lot of money.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be that way. Like most of this other stuff, you can get to it and it'd be really valuable for, not that much. Well, Milo, all right, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your insights. I really actually appreciate your what it's not, right? So that's actually what's sticking. I have a lot of Toastmasters. Did you know too, I actually spoke to, not only was there Laugh Masters, but during the pandemic, a bunch of Toastmasters created Nerd Masters. Which was all the people who helped all the Toastmaster chapters go online in the first year. That was their mission. It was really cool.
And I'm not trashing Toastmasters by any stretch. I think it's a wonderful, warm organization, but it's also kind of a slow way to learn. I have had a lot of people say to me, I got more out of 5 sessions with you than 3 years of Toastmasters. And I was like, this was geared for you with someone who's been giving feedback to people for 20 years, not someone who might have joined the chapter after you. So if you've got plenty of time and you don't have an urgency, but if you're giving a speech in November, no, don't join Toastmasters for that. You should have joined in 4 years ago.
It's kind of like the difference between playing on a football, like a city league football team, and then hiring like Pete Carroll as your coach or something.
Yeah.
Although Pete Carroll's on fire right now today too, because apparently he yelled at his team. But let's not talk about that. All right. Anyway, so Milo, thank you so much. I really hope you take the moment to tune into our engaging conference, October 23rd through 25th. I would love to hear your opinion about how we do stuff here when we have a conference, and I actually get to choose how it's presented to people. But we have some amazing speakers that I hope that you gain some value from, and I hope to that we get another opportunity. I know that I should be coming to San Diego at least once in the next year. So
I'd love to meet up in person, or we can just sit across a coffee shop from each other, both on Zoom if you're more comfortable.
Oh, I just do this for you in the real world, going, "Hey, no, I don't recognize you. How about this? Oh, I know who you are, John."
It's always funny when people say to me, "I didn't know you were short," because I get to be as tall as everybody else on Zoom.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Milo. By the way, click the 2 links and you can see Milo both in his speaking career as well as his speaker coach career. Thanks again, Milo.
No, good talking to you. I had fun.
All right. Well, this is John Chen with another episode of the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. And let's see. Oh, I have a couple new things here. Yeah. So let's do this. If you are watching here, make sure you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe, hit the share link. Geez, for like this or for crying out loud, if you're watching this live or on a replay, do us a favor and get a comment. If you want to subscribe and see new episodes every Wednesday, go to engagingvirtualmeetings.online for the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. Geez, we have over 100 episodes coming to you with gems like Milo just dropped on you. And by the way, if you want to be the next person to be interviewed, just go to engagingvirtualmeetings.com/meet, select interview, and you can be the next guest here on the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. We will see you next time.